We have a bit of member news to kick off with today. And first of all, we have some new members. And in fact, we have more new members than even this. So we're very, very excited. We just added some today. So I'm going to kick it off to Carol and Michelle so she can tell us about our new members.
Well, we'll start with Julian Le Bourgeois. Did I do that?
Yes, who happens to be here. Thank you.
Barbara Ehrlich invited her in. So welcome. Sorry, I'm getting confused already. Marjorie Lightman.
Thank
you. She says friends invited her. And Corrine Mayer and Jennifer Towns. Yeah, childhood friends of mine. And Thomas Vogt. Did I pronounce it correctly? And he's a friend of Paul Chestnut, who invited him in. And now we're really going to get test my ability to pronounce names. Oye Owolewa.
All right.
And he's a guest of Phil Parnell, and he joined on the spot. He came in and he saw us all and said, "I want to be a part of this."
And
so
he is also one of our shadow representatives in Congress, if you do not know the name. So thank you for being here.
And Shelley Livingston. So Shelley said that she's been meaning to join for 4 years. And again, she walked in and she saw all of this. And so,
well, we have, I think most of these we have not voted on, so we need to do that, right? So maybe as a group, we can vote to include our new members. All those who agree say yay.
Yay.
Any nays? No. All right. We're a welcoming group. Welcome to everybody. You are now officially AOI members. Thank you so much for signing up and for showing up. We certainly appreciate you here. Thank you.
And welcome to all the visitors.
And welcome to all of our visitors here today. We appreciate you joining us for this, and we hope that you come back and join us again as well. And thank you for those of you who have also recently renewed. We are building our way towards our November celebration of our 160th anniversary. So if you have not, for some reason, even though we are this late in 2025, if you would like to fully partake in that celebration, please take a look in your emails or your mail, and you probably have a notice from us about the possibility of renewing before the 2026 renewal process starts again, because we are just on the cusp of that. So thank you if you did just renew. We do have some other notes for some of our members. We have a passing to note. Ro Quander, who passed away in August. If you did not know Ro, he was a retired senior administrative law judge for D.C., an author and a member of the Quander family, which is one of the oldest African American families in the United States, including some of whom who were enslaved to George Washington at Mount Vernon. And he was very connected to collecting and writing and sharing the history of the Quander family. He earned both his bachelor's and his law degrees from Howard University, and he was a member of many civic and social organizations around D.C. as well. So condolences to Carmen, who's also a member, as well as his entire family. So if you know Ro and if you know Carmen, please pass those along for us as well. We also have a birthday to note. So one of our AOI Life members, Betty Lichtenstein, and we have, she is a member, as well as her daughter Sally Burke, who is also here with us today. And we are just getting in the happy birthday because her birthday was the 15th, so she actually turned 100 this week. There's a great picture of Betty up there, but there's also a fabulous one that Sally shared that's here. So I don't know, you probably can't see it, but for a quick look at that, Sally will have that with her for the remainder of the luncheon. Betty was raised by her grandparents here in D.C. They owned a corner grocery in Southwest Washington. And they raised her because her mother had died in childbirth. Growing up in D.C., Betty remembered specifically how excited she was when Eleanor Roosevelt came to her school for their May Day celebration. And she was so excited as a kid that she rushed over to her and completely messed up the maypole flag ribbon ceremony that was there, which made it even more indelible in her memory for that specific day. She met her husband Hesh during World War II when he was recovering from an injury at Fort Belvoir. And after the war, they lived in Army barracks in Southeast while he went to GW on the GI Bill. And they later moved to Montgomery County where they raised their 3 children. Her professional career focused on mental health, and she did have jobs both at St. Elizabeth's and Health and Human Services a while ago. And also volunteered for decades with her work in mental health, so much so that she earned Montgomery County's Path to Achievement Award in 2003. She cannot be here with us today, but she is going to be not only celebrating today, but she will be watching the video. So could we get maybe on the count of 3 a hearty happy birthday Betty, so that will be passed along to her. So I'm going to count out to 3. On 3, happy birthday Betty. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, Betty. Thank you. Thank you. And pass it along. And we have an award to note. AOI member Terry Walls received the Hughes Gossett Award by the Supreme Court Historical Society. This is for his article, Judge Eugene Brooks, Supreme Court Messenger, Proponent of Black Awareness, 1881 to 1926. And this article examines the role that Brooks played as a messenger to Supreme Court Justice Melville Fuller and his impact on the African American community in D.C. That is going to include the impact that he had being vice president and then president of the black version of AOI. So he was in AOIC in the 1910s. In this article, Walsh does a terrific job of giving an overview of what AOIC was doing, what it was like during those early years, and how it was connected to AOI. So I highly recommend it. Walsh is a resident historian at Dacor Bacon House. He's also a historian of modern Egyptian history, author and editor of 2 books, and has a specialty, of course, in DC history. So we congratulate Terry as well. And speaking of history, we are celebrating our own this year. AOI turns 160 in December. And as we've been celebrating that, we've been trying to get to know a few of our founders. So far, we've talked about these gentlemen, Taylor, Bradley, Force, and Callan. And as I know, Force is still my favorite. That's my favorite photo of that anybody has. And I think we all feel him every time we look at that. We do have in our newsletters, we do have little capsules of their bios, but you can also rewatch any of them that you missed because Bill Brown has kindly put them not only on our website, but he has separated them out and put them on our YouTube channel. So if you're interested in any of the particular founders, you can find them there. Today, we are going to be talking about AOI's first corresponding secretary, John Carroll Brent. And a little brief bio for him. He's the second of the founders that we've talked about who were both born in D.C. and died in D.C. So he was born in D.C. in 1814. His father, William, who you see on the upper left, William Brent, he served as clerk of the circuit court and clerk of the criminal court for over 40 years. And he is identified as one of the earliest residents of Washington, D.C. As you might be able to tell from his name, he is related on his father's side to the Carroll family of Maryland. So 2 of his great uncles were Daniel Carroll, who signed both the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution. and was a representative in the very first Congress of the U.S. He was also one of the first 3 commissioners of D.C. to develop D.C. Another great uncle was John Carroll, the first American Catholic bishop and archbishop and founder of Georgetown University. His uncle Robert Brent, who's on the slide there, was the first mayor of the city of Washington. So he's well connected. As you can see on the slide, well, you can't read it quite particularly well there, but he worked primarily as a lawyer. He died from a kidney ailment at the age of 61. His funeral was at St. Peter's on Capitol Hill, same parish, different building as the current St. Peter's, and he's buried at Mount Olivet Cemetery in Northeast, across from the Arboretum. AOI's member, Dr. John Bond Blake, was one of his pallbearers. And Dr. Blake is one of our current board members, Sherry Sewell's great-great-grandfather. So we are closer to all of this history than we actually sometimes do think. And you can see, you can't really see it on here, but it does mention in his obituary that he was secretary, he was a founding member and secretary of AOI. He left a large paper trail, and that's going to include the first known mention of football at Georgetown University, which was then Georgetown College. So this is in 1830, and you remember that his great uncle is John Carroll. So I'm guessing he had an in for getting into Georgetown University there. It was pretty good. The school was founded in 1789, and this is 1830. So you can see it's still pretty pastoral at this time in 1830. The other image that you see is a letter that he sent to his sister describing his football and trying to explain what football is. If you can't read it, he says, "We play football at present. What I mean by football is that it is a kind of leather bag in which is placed a bladder filled with air, which causes it to bounce up very high and is kicked about by the boys. I have had my feet skinned and bruised by it very often. I am lame with one I have received today." So football causing injuries at Georgetown at least since 1830. He was also very involved with the Washington Monument Society. This is obviously a very important issue to AOI members because we had so many members of AOI that were also members of the Washington Monument Society. He served as its secretary for 30 years. And that's going to include in 1854 when he signed his name here to this appeal that he sent out asking people to please donate money so that we can finally finish the Washington Monument. Because it had stalled. Again, I think most of us know, you can see the color difference on the Washington Monument. And it had stalled for many years because of funding before it was finally completed. There's a good article by AOI member John Lockwood, historian John Lockwood, on the Archives website that you can read that gives a whole history of the Washington Monument Society. So if you're at all interested in how they raised money, what problems that they had, you can take a look at that. You can see in the middle is one of the certificates that you would get if you donated money to the Washington Monument. They would send you this very elaborate certificate that was there. Another current AOI member, because again, everything is connected these days, Pat McCarthy. His ancestor, Jacob Weimeyer, was a vice president of AOI, a stonemason and a contractor, and his company provided the stone and helped build that second portion of the Washington Monument. It's circled on the bottom left, but you can see his name. His company had set up at the site to build that, and you can still see the company's name in some of these old pictures. Brent would go on to be a prolific writer. He wrote a biography of his great uncle, John Carroll, pamphlets and books supporting the Smithsonian. He was a huge supporter of the fine arts in Washington, spoke several languages. You can find his papers and his diary at both DC History Center and Library of Congress. So he left a very good trail for us to follow. That is kind of going to bring us, since we're looking at our records and our own history, what we have deemed the Campaign 160. So we are going to spend our 160th year coming up looking at AOI and trying to preserve our own history, our own records, and keep them and make them accessible to anybody who wants to research, to look for all of these names and find out who is involved, find their ancestors, and be able to write a more complete history of DC, as well as AOI. So we are asking members, as we come up on this historic number, to possibly donate $160, a version of $160, $16, $1.60, $1,600, any version of this that might pique your interest, so that we will be able to do that. It's such a dicey period of time for archives, for repositories, that we want to make sure that we keep these records and they don't disappear from history in the next 160 years. We have these forms available on the table on the way out if you would like to pick one up and donate today. You can mail in a donation. You can scan the QR code and donate, or you can donate online. We make it very, very easy. You can also give us cash on the way out. We'll put it in our pockets. Any way you want to do it, we will do that. But we would appreciate that. And the money does go back to AOI to be able to keep our history together. Actually, that's all I have for slides. Events, some events to mention. The Dock Bacon House that we just talked about is having a lecture on Foggy Bottom during the Civil War on October 30th. An AOI member, Frank Leone, is going to be speaking on a panel for that. That's October 30th. They also have a parlor music with the Washington Rebels Heritage Voices on October 5th. So you can go to their website, the Dock Bacon website, if you're interested in either of those. Mary Belcher, who is a speaker here about the Walter Pierce Park Cemetery. She's going to be giving walking tours, free walking tours, over the next 2 weekends. And you can go to the Walter Pierce Park Cemetery website to look for that information as to where to go. They're free, and I think you can basically just show up. And these, the cemetery, if you are unfamiliar with them, is one of the busiest Reconstruction era black cemeteries in the city, and it's the only Quaker burial ground that we have in the city that you can still go and learn about. And I think I had a couple of people who wanted to mention, well, number one, for here at the Whitmore House, the WNDC, they're having a New Orleans Jazz Night on Friday, September 26th. If you're interested in coming back for that, featuring the Tad Wilson Septet. So there's some of these cards that you can get on your way out if you're interested in that. Marcy, I think, also had a mention of. Go ahead, give it a try.
Hi, everybody. My name is Marcy Cohen. I'm well known in the city in some circles, but I'm here, and this is not a Republican or a Democratic ask. This is an ask to participate in saving our democracy and our First Amendment. Every Wednesday night, the WNDC hosts a Get Out the Vote effort. And what you will be doing is likely writing postcards to people who we need to get out the vote. They may have not participated in elections in the past, so we write to them. We also text, we also make phone calls. It is extremely important for us, no matter what party you're in, is to save our democracy, our First Amendment rights, which are being attacked daily. It is important to get your vote heard in the United States, and we give you the opportunity every Wednesday night to come here at 6 o'clock, and we leave at 8. And it is so important. I hope that each one of you will kind of look into your conscience to contribute to this election that is coming up this year, and especially next year. I just appeal to your conscience, your heart, and your efforts. Thank you.
I heard somebody say wallet. No, it wasn't a fundraising, so it was just your time and effort for that one.
However, we all could use money.
If you're willing to share, it's here. It's here. Marcy, right? It's here? It's right here. Every Wednesday here. If you didn't hear that, alcohol is involved for that. Okay, our next lunch, we have a slight change in our schedule for October. So at our next lunch, as part of our Creating DC History series, we have Dr. Mary Beth Corrigan. She's a historian and curator of collections on slavery, memory, and reconciliation at Georgetown University. And she's going to be discussing how the inclusion of audiences has changed the stories that we focus on and the stories that we tell about DC. So she's going to be talking about her work that for the last couple of decades that she's been focusing on DC and how that has changed. Yes, and not that I have. Does anybody know of any Latino or Hispanic heritage events going on? Because I know some have been canceled. But some are this month and next month, but some are still going on. If you know of any, let us know. We're happy to promote them, especially next month if you know them coming up. I'm going to turn this over to Nelson, or who I've lost track of. Nelson, so we have our trivia questions.
This is Carol Schwartz for mayor. And here's the beginning of her campaign right in this bag. I'm giving it to her tonight. She's got to come out and run. Okay. Well, I have a little comment first about I live on Capitol Hill, and the library I usually go to is being renovated, the Northeast or Southeast Library. So the other day on a walk, I happened to walk into the one in Northeast during my walk, and reading a newspaper, there was an address I wanted to write down. Well, I had my little book, but I didn't have a pencil. So I went up to the librarian at the desk, and I said, "Do you have a pencil I can borrow to write down this address?" She said, "Well, you know, I looked in the drawer the other day here, and there was this pencil." And she pulled out a pencil. And guess what the pencil said? It was a little pencil like this. And I have some back there. Anybody buys a book gets one of these pencils. You got to take it. It says, "Writing Carol Schwartz." And connect the arrows. And I've actually used some of these pencils. In one election, I think I wrote in Carol for almost every office. Also, the book I recommend it. I'm in the process of writing an index for it because it's really a very interesting history of politics here over a long period of time, local politics. And so I am working on an index, and I hope to get it done and up online because it's really, it'll be a resource book in the future for people researching the history of local government here. It's an amazing contribution, and she should be congratulated for putting it together. Thank you. My trivia question is kind of a little interesting today. I've been researching, trying to find out the origin where Tunnicliff's Tavern was at different times on Capitol Hill. And I happened to be looking through the 18672 city directory the other day. And they had a section I've never seen before. It said miscellaneous organizations. And right at the top, in alphabetical order, was Association of the Oldest Inhabitants of the District of Columbia, listing President John B. Blake and 15 vice presidents. We had 15 vice presidents. Everybody wanted to be a vice president. And we had a recording secretary and a corresponding secretary and a treasurer. And there was this office, marshal. We had a marshal. What did the marshal do? Well, I don't know. But I know somebody that can find out who's very intellectually curious, and that's Bill Brown. So I'm recommending that he appoint a committee and head it up to investigate this office. What was his responsibilities? How long did it last? And I have a person who headed the office at this time, Serafin Masi, M-A-S-I. A very interesting name. I'm trying to see if there's an obituary out there about him. But maybe also at this time, and throughout its history at this various times after the Civil War, maybe we were also the Association of the Oldest Immigrants of the District of Columbia. Might have been. So anyway, I have a resolution that Bill Brown be appointed a committee to find out what the office was involved in and whether it should be reinstituted. Do I hear the yeas? Yay! Hearing no no's, Bill's appointed. And maybe there's a marshal in the future. Marshal Brown. Okay, stay tuned. I'm going to give this to Carol before I forget on the way out. So she doesn't forget it. This is your campaign. There's a lot of things in there will remind you. And about the Republican Party locally and nationally that we were associated with for many years, and we're sad it doesn't function today. But we'll get it going again. It's just you and me. We'll get it going again. I also wanted to add quickly, if anybody would like to do any research of this on their own, try and find out who this gentleman was. I have some information here about him. He actually was also in a directory at the time of listed at a boarding house. Now, often the professions or the person the business was in, I don't know if he was running a boarding house, managing a boarding house, or this was where he was living. But it was at 512 9th Street. So he was living in the city, and I'm really curious to know as we do our research on the history of it, did we have a lot of immigrants in AOI at that time after the Civil War, maybe up till the First World War? We'll see. This will come out in our research, and as I say, I do urge to contribute to our fund to preserve our archives. Thank you. Not too many, I don't think. And of course, we evolved. There was an association of oldest inhabitants colored ink functioning at the same time. And that's part of our history too. Well, we're not back there, thank goodness. We're a different society here in that respect at this time. And we're open to everybody to be members.
We actually have a couple of older photographs of AOI from the 1800s, the late 1800s, that have women in it. So I'm wondering if they were guests. They certainly were not allowed to be members. So stay tuned. We'll try to find out what they were from. And Nelson was talking about Carol's book. So we persuaded Carol to bring some of her books with her. So they will be available in the back and for Carol to sign, I imagine. Once Carol is finished speaking. So don't let that slip by you for that opportunity as well. And I'm going to introduce Carol, our speaker for today, but she needs very little introduction, I think, in our room today. But as a reminder, the Honorable Carol Schwartz is so closely associated with DC politics. I think it's very easy to think that she was a native Washingtonian, and she is not. So she was born in Mississippi, and she was raised in Midland, Texas, graduated from UT Austin with a degree in special education. She moved to D.C. in 1966 and began her political life as a Republican. She would later become an independent. In 1974, serving 2 terms on the Board of Education. She would later then serve on the D.C. Council from 1985 to 1989, and again from 1997 to 2009. She ran for mayor of D.C. 5 times, including in 1994, which was the closest mayoral general election in D.C. history, so by that much. Her numerous associations with D.C. civic and charitable organizations include serving on the board of Studio Theater, Whitman Walker, the Jewish Council for the Aging, Humane Rescue Alliance, as first woman president of the Metropolitan Boys and Girls Club, and on the D.C. Board of Ethics and Government Accountability. Her 2017 autobiography, which is the book that is in the back, is titled Quite a Life, From Defeat to Defeat and Back. So Carol has kindly said that she would allow a good bit of time for Q&A, because I think we're going to have a big Q&A today. So at that point, when we get to that, if you could just please raise your hand, we will bring the mic to you. You can state your name and ask your questions. We appreciate that. And with that, I turn it over to Carol. Thank you so much for coming today.
Hi, everybody. I'm a little shorter, so I have to do this. But between Cindy and Nelson, I have a hard act to follow. But I would like you, if you don't mind, because you've been sitting for quite a while, I'm going to give you a 7th inning stand-up if you feel like it. Does anybody feel like standing up just for a minute to stretch? Because I'm going to be finished about midnight. So anyway, I thought it just would feel good to stretch. And I won't. We'll be through by dinner. Anyway, I wore one of my smaller rings, so you would recognize me. And I'm really thrilled to be here and to be asked to speak. I think, it was titled, talking about my political life in D.C., but I think probably you all know it as well as I know it. And so I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm going to, and then we'll have Q&A at the end, so you can ask me any questions you might have. But I'm going to dwell on, if you don't mind, my childhood. Because my childhood made me the person you saw all those years. And it was actually a terrible, terrible childhood, which I would not wish on any of my worst enemies. What? Oh, yeah. Well, there could be some exceptions, okay? And maybe the person that got rid of me. But anyway, I want to talk about that. I was born in Greenville, as Cindy mentioned, Greenville, Mississippi. That was where my grandmother and her father was born. And then we moved to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where I lived for the first 6 years of my life, then 2 years in Oklahoma City, and we landed in Midland, Texas, where my parents, who were both college graduates, my father from MIT, my mother the high-level graduate of LSU, and yet they were searching to make a living. Dad had a terrible temper, could be a very violent person, and therefore had a hard time keeping a job. They had heard they really had lost money that they had made in Oak Ridge when Dad was working on the Manhattan Project. My mother always worked, and by the way, my maternal grandmother always worked. So I came from a family of working women, at least on that side. And then they went to Midland, Texas, because my dad heard about the oil boom in Midland, Texas. Now, we were not part of the oil boom. What we were part of is on the poor side of town. We owned a little mama, papa, work clothing store, and daughter work clothing store. I started working in that store when I was 8 years old, and it really was across the tracks on the poor side of the town. We lived here, and a house we owned, a very small house that we owned, and 5 blocks away was a store that we worked in. And in those days, it was like open 7 days a week, from 10 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. And I worked in the store starting at 8. I had also, my only sibling was an individual who had was intellectually challenged, quite intellectually challenged. In fact, my parents would not have had me because, in those days everybody thought, oh, it's your family or your bloodline or we're a bad combination, which of course it is. And it's really, I studied special education and became a teacher. It really has to do with other things, not this incompatibility. But at that point, that was the kind of the thoughts of the day. So I wouldn't have been here had I been born just a few months later. I mean earlier. Because my parents were my brother was a year and a half older than I am, and when he was 9 months old, they were finding out that he really had issues, and issues that were going to have to be really cared for a lot of years. So my mother and father both even told me that had my mom not at that time been a couple of months pregnant with me, I would never have been here. And but anyway, they went on and had me, and I became a caretaker for my brother, who I adored, by the way, absolutely adored. And I think many of you may have seen him over the years when he used to come visit. And he was precious, precious, precious. But anyway, I started taking care of him at 5, started working in a store, was not allowed to have any friends over, could not talk on the phone. My father was only 5 blocks away. If he called home and the line was busy, he would literally walk or drive home. We only had the one car, so you didn't know where it was positioned. Walk it and just rip it out, the cord out of the wall, to keep me from being on the phone. So I also, according to my mother, which I find hard to believe, was a very shy, quiet child. And, Mom said you just were like a shy, quiet child who just stayed out of everybody's way. Like you knew people didn't have time for you between Johnny and working, and that you just knew it and you just stayed out of everybody's way. Well, I sure made out for that over the years. And now I want to be in everybody's way, and I certainly did when I was on the council. When I saw wrong, I certainly wanted to make it right, regardless of what the position was. But so I really didn't even, I still find that hard to believe, but Mom swore to it, and so did others who knew me then. But I then started in junior high school, trying to develop a personality and, trying to make friends just there because I couldn't talk to them on the phone or be with them later. I also didn't get invited to a lot of parties because we were the one Jewish family, certainly on the south side of town, and there was only one other that I know of in Midland, Texas, but they lived on the rich side of town, so we didn't know them either. So a combination of being on the poor side of the town and being Jewish in a town where there weren't many black people to pick on, I really had terrible challenges as a child. I had a crush on a guy named Jimmy Murphy. I can't remember if it was in 5th or 6th grade. But and I think he liked me too until he went home and mentioned to his father that he had a girlfriend, and her name is Carol Levitt. You mean that Jew? Are you kidding? And he then walked to class the next day and just got the class saying, dirty Jew, dirty Jew, dirty Jew. And I go, crying home to my mother, who's not even home. Going to the store, the house was 2 blocks away this way, the store was a couple of blocks away this way. And I said, Mom, they called me a dirty Jew. And Mom says, that'll happen, Carol, you got to get used to it, and just turned me around. And I really literally pushed me back to school. So I grew up with lots of prejudice. Couldn't spend the night with people. Guys couldn't date me. Combination of in Midland, Texas, which became a very nouveau riche town because of the oil boom. It would be like, oh, you're going out with her, poor side of town and Jewish. It just was. So I had a lot of that. But I did find in junior high school, getting elected to various things and having some leadership opportunities. In fact, even in my 6th grade at South Elementary School, I was elected to be the head of the safety patrol. And boy, was that when it all began. You get to help people, tell them what to do, stop and go. And that made me become a bossier person, too. But anyway, I went on to junior high school. In high school, the only school I was able to the only one I was able to apply to was the University of Texas. And I applied there. I kind of went there kicking and screaming because had I never received any money from working since I was 8 years old, even though I was on Social Security at that point, I always said, well, can I go to the school I want to? And they said, yeah, because we never paid you. Well, when the time came, the University of Texas was $100 a semester for state kids, and so that was the only choice I had. And then I said, well, what about my money? And they says, well, we'll give you a big wedding. That didn't happen either. There were 9 people at my wedding. So it was a childhood, though, that I want to go back and talk about a little bit. As I worked in that store, and we were not very busy, I had a lot of time to think and watch and observe. And we had one employee, part-time employee, who was African American. And I saw what kind of crap he had to put up with in life. I took my brother, to movies and around town, and I saw how people made fun of him. And I just saw all this horrible stuff happening, and not only to mention the prejudice towards my religion. And it really made me intolerant of intolerance. I mean, I really despised it. And then I used to think, and I watched my father, who told my mother every working minute of the day what to do. And I remember thinking, well, what gives him the right to tell her what to do? You know, okay, he went to college. Well, so did she. He works in the store, but she works harder in the store. She's there more, she does the books. You know, so I became a feminist in those days, too, at a very early age. And so I wanted to tell you that story because I think it made me, when I arrived in Washington, to be the person I became in the political world. And that is trying to right wrongs, fight bad stuff. And I think I got it all from my childhood, where I had to put up with all that bad stuff. I was going to make sure I and no one else would have to do it. And even though it was a horrible childhood, which I said I wouldn't wish on except a couple of people, I'm telling you, it really, 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 I'm glad it was my childhood, because it and my children too keep doing the kinds of things I do. My oldest daughter is a judge in the family court in Manhattan, where Judge Judy got her start. And my other daughter is a stand-up comedian in New York, which has gotten harder after COVID and all, but she also does other things. But she's constantly volunteering, teaching immigrants how to fill out forms, teaching a child how to read, and also working as a volunteer at an animal rescue place. And then my son is a singer. They're both in Manhattan. My son is a singer-songwriter, musician, and that's after, a cum laude graduate of Cornell and a master's degree from London School of Economics. He's now making sure he's a starving artist. But he does his main work, and you may want to look him up too. His name, Hillary Schwartz, Stephanie Schwartz, and then Douglas Levitt Schwartz is what I named him, and now he's gone to Douglas Schwartz Levitt, as are his wife and children, and so that was my maiden name. And it's all great, except when I introduce them, I say, I want you to meet my son, Doug Levitt. And they'll say, oh, I didn't know she had his first marriage, But other than that, but he too, he travels around on the Greyhound bus. And he tells the stories of the underclass, their stories, many of them veterans of our services. So I'm proud that my children were only products of the DC public schools, from pre-K through grades 12. And I'm not sure there's a politician in town who can say all of that, except for maybe Linda Crop, maybe. And so I had wanted to tell you that part of the story, and I left the council not by choice. I left the council because I did my greatest work, and that is making sure that people in the private sector had a modicum of sick leave. And that's really the greatest story that I go on ad nauseum about in the book, but it's really the greatest story ever, because all the councils signed on. 12 members of the 13-member council signed on when they first introduced it, and they even had in the paper the next day that 12 members, Carol Schwartz, did not sign on. And I didn't sign on because it was too extreme. regardless of the size of the organization, not the organization, your business, you would have to give them 10 days a year for every single employee you had. And I thought that was too extreme. That would hurt our small businesses that are sometimes barely hanging on in the first place. And so and guess who they sent it to me? This is one of the most, guess who they sent it to? What committee? I had the Committee on Government Operations, which had nothing to do with workers in the private sector. They sent it to me. Why? To kill it off. Because they really had no interest in it. They just showed an interest, and yet they send it to me to get killed off. And I decided I wasn't going to kill it off. I was going to make it a shadow of its former self. But I was going to make us the first, quote, state, even though we know we're not one, in the country who would make this law. And I brought all of these individuals of the 26 organizations together. And I said to them, all right, folks, it was on at nighttime, and I went into one of the places downstairs and in the Wilson building, and they were all there. 25 of the 26 were represented. And I went around to each of the table. I am willing to bring it out, but I'm going to make it a shadow of its former self. It'll be something, but it's not going to be anything this dramatic and this extreme. But I'm not going to go through that, which may even hurt my career and maybe even end my career. I was smart enough to know that. I said, without your telling me, one by one, to all 25 of you, that you will not, if it makes it through my committee and goes to the full council, start piling all that stuff back on. What year was this? 2008. And I was up for re-election in 2008. And so I went around to each and every one of them and looked them in the eye, and they each said, I promise, yes, I will, I promise. And then the one group that wasn't there, I said, please talk to them. And then if they agree, we're moving. And I went around and talked to the business community, the hospitals, all of them. And actually got it right before Christmas passed. And, it passed in the committee, and then we, and I got praised for it. Even the Chamber of Commerce and the Board of Trade said, we worked so well with Carol Schwartz to bring this out. And we're very proud, of it, and, good job. And then after the holidays, when we had to vote on it as a council, because it had come out of committee, the garage people were up in arms. The richest people in town are up in arms that they're going to have to do what it was, the result of the bill was 3 days for the small businesses, 5 days for the middle-sized businesses, and 7 days for the large businesses. And as we know, even our drugstores, our rich drugstores, all of these people that are very wealthy hire part-time workers so they do not have to give a modicum of sick leave. And so you have, you go to a Walgreens, and there's all these usually black women standing there, older black women who have to work 3 jobs and still don't get a modicum of sick leave, but just to live. And I felt their pain, and I did something about it. But then when it came to the vote in January, after the holidays, all of those garage people, led by David Catania, made sure that we didn't have the vote, But I kept working with my colleagues, I got 7 of them, and we were a body of we were a body and are a body of 13. I got 7 votes, and they had only 6. So they knew they needed to table it. They were going to table it. And so 2 of my votes I felt a little weird about. One was Marion, who didn't show up that morning, and one was Harry Thomas, who it was one of my votes, the one that went to jail for stealing $350,000 from our children's fund that Anthony Williams started. And anyway, I got there and I said, oh dear, I got an instinct. So I called Marion, I reached him, and I said, get your ass down here immediately. He did. And then the other one walked in, but I still only had 6. And the other one walked in, and I just saw him walking in like I knew where he was going. So I went over to Muriel Bowser, who had not joined in for one reason, because she'd asked me to make one more amendment. And because I had really so, done something with the bill that I didn't want to compromise anymore with my 7 votes. But then when I saw I didn't have it, I went over to her and I said, you got it. I talked to the group, the 26 others, the leader of them, and I said, I'm going to have to compromise a little further. And they said, Carol, do it, whatever you have to do. I did it, and Muriel Bowser, they thought she was a yes vote for tabling. They walked in to table it, and they had the votes to table it, and it would never have made it off the table. And so he walked in, they all thought they had a victory, got to Muriel, and she voted no. Bless her heart. And anyway, so not only do we have this now, which is not hurting anybody, it's only helping people in need. And now the states all over the country, 40 some odd states took my exact compromise bill and have used it in their states all over this country. There's only a few that haven't yet. And then Barack Obama used it used my bill that I wrote with my staff. He has used it for contractors for the federal government, that they have to offer to get a contract some amount of sick leave for their employees. So I went out on a bill that I remain so proud of that it was worth having to leave because of it. Well, anyway, I will now want to open up for questions for anybody that has one. Yes, ma'am?
If you were mayor right now, would you be doing anything differently with the current administration for the city that is being done now? And if you don't want to answer it,
no, I'm glad to answer it. I would not. I'm sickened by what's going on, and I know they're sickened as well. And I have not been a depressed person. Am becoming quite depressed by what's going on in what's happening because of outsiders in our city. But I would be doing exactly what they're doing right now. I would be doing exactly what they're doing right now, because you're dealing with the biggest bullies, and you're dealing with people that have no compassion or care about us and our well-being. And I think I don't want to have them baited anymore than they're already baiting. Now, if they go after our elected officials, this little, the fact that we didn't even get home rule to 1974 to elect our own mayor and our own council. School board, we got the ability in 1968, but the council not till 1974. So, and now they're talking about doing away with that. At that point, I will be taking to the streets, and I will not shut up.
Yeah. Hello.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Hi, this is Representative Oye Owolowo. I have a quick question. First of all, thank you for being here to have this conversation. As you know, 2025 has been a really difficult political year. A lot of divisiveness, a lot of rhetoric, whether on TV or on social media. It has really plagued Congress and the White House. What impact do you think it's had on our council and local governance?
Well, I think, listen, I admire the council, and I know many of the new members of the council. I'm sure they are also very depressed and unhappy. And a few are speaking up. And I don't, listen, we live in a free society where we have First Amendment rights, even though you're going to be deathly punished for them, unfortunately, these days. But so I think they're as upset and depressed as I am, and I'm sure everybody in this room is. But I do think you can't, in this case, fight fire with fire, because they are in charge. And it's just difficult. But when they come after our few elected officials, and the fact we only have, the 13, and then we have our own Attorney General, and we have our school board made up of 9 members, and then I think we all have to take to the streets, canes and all. We have to take to the streets. What?
He asked if pitchforks were okay.
I heard. I don't like violence of any kind. Yes. Well, I haven't been a Republican since since 2013. Why? Well, I really lost a great deal of interest in my party, and during Newt Gingrich's time. And no offense, Democrats, but when he worked at getting all the Southern Democrats to leave the Democratic Party and come to my party. And I really wasn't happy about that, because there were plenty of, in those days, there were plenty of moderate Republicans. So I was fine being a Republican. But then when all the others started coming over, I wasn't fine being a Republican anymore, but I did not leave because I'm not. I did not leave the party then because I thought it would be hurtful to the city. I was the only Republican vote, down there. Because I was able to stop a lot of things that people didn't even know about that went on in the background. Like when the Congress came up with no single people could adopt children. Remember, that was a rider on one of the bills by a Republican in California. I was able to get an appointment and go down, and I went down with Carl Schwartz, who's a big activist in the LGBTQ community. And the two of us went down, and I started crying as I was talking about friends of mine who had adopted children who would have just been left in foster homes or who knows where had they not. And anyway, so I felt very you know, drawn to do that, but I could get the appointment, and I started talking about these friends of mine, and I started crying. Now, I don't cry on demand, but I just started crying, and you know, that rider disappeared. That next day I was gone. So I was doing a lot of those kind of things. So having a Republican, it certainly wasn't helpful to my mayoral campaigns, where you know, in Washington, D.C., there's no place that's, I don't know what it is now, but it was 11 Democrats to every 1 Republican. I was and am still friends of Connie Morella, you know, who was a congresswoman from Maryland. And we'd get together and she would bemoan her 3-to-1. And I'd say, oh, I would give my right arm to just have 3-to-1, you know, opposition. But it was helpful to me. I know it was hard for me to get elected mayor, even though look at the number of votes. I mean, even my first one in 1986, which I hadn't even planned, I just run for council in 84. I hadn't planned to run for mayor in 86. I'd had the school board from 74 to 82, as was mentioned by Cindy. But I'd gone out for the next 8 years and worked as a community activist, you know, with the community, you know, nonprofit groups. And then when I'm here, I am so glad to be an at-large member of the council in 84. And then here Marion is running in 86. And I tried to get Vince Reed to run. I tried to get everybody, John Ray to run. I tried to get all these people to run against Marion because we all knew he was having, you know, drug problems. We knew it. And we knew it could be very difficult. But nobody would do it. So I jumped into the race, and I didn't even want to jump into the race. But I got 33% of the vote even that time. And I do have a quick little Marion Barry thing which I am so, like, brought tears to my eyes, actually. And that is, you know, Mary and I always got along personally, even though I ran against him twice and usually gave him a hard time about various personal things. Politically, we were very much in sync. But, you know, the running around town like some horny teenager, you know, was, and I'm not saying that behind his back, I said it straight to his face at the time. You know, that he was the mayor of the nation's capital. He had to couldn't be acting like that. And, but I now play, in my retirement, a bridge with a group that started, gosh, back in the 1960s, with a great player named Linda Kropp, who will tell you I taught her how to play bridge. And she's so much better than I am now. But anyway, I'm playing with all these great black women that are just superior players, and they were like people like Gladys Mack, you know, who was the chair of the Metro Board that brought us our wonderful metro system. And anyway, several of them have told me recently, and one was sitting at that table maybe about a year ago. Did you know, I forgot to tell you this, but did you know Marion Barry used to always say that Carol Schwartz would have made the best mayor this city ever had? And I said, oh, you mean except for him? And they said they had said the same exact thing to him, except for him. And he said, no, including me. So that one, when I've heard it several times, I'm not going to let it bring tears to my eyes right now. But listen, he was a smart man. I think he did great things for our city. I think his addictions, both drinking, drugs, and women, got him into trouble, and thus got us into trouble. but I am very, very fond of him and miss him, actually. Any other questions?
Well, I just wondered about why were you a Republican in the first place?
Why? Well, I grew up in Midland, Texas, a very Republican place. And I also liked Eisenhower. I liked Eisenhower. And at 8 years old, after school I'd wear a button and I'd give out literature to people. 8 years old. And after, if I could get out of the store, I'd go out on the street and go election day and say, I like Ike, vote for Ike. So I became a Republican pretty early on. Also, I've always been a little bit of a contrarian, and Texas was so Democratic. And I, didn't love everything that was going on in government there. So I was stayed a Republican. And came to D.C., where I was certainly very much of a minority, but kept it for, I guess mainly the contrary. I didn't love everything that was going on in this government, and so I stayed that contrarian. And I really was proud to be a member of the Republican Party, and in my book, I mention all of the things. I mean, the first women in Congress were Republicans. There's a whole huge list. Richard Nixon is the one that signed our thing to be able to elect people, to elect our own people, and he signed it. So, if you look historically, not such bad guys and gals. Today, are you kidding? It's like a whole different world. And it's a sad thing because a two-party system is healthy. And, but I didn't become, I became an independent, but I didn't become a Democrat, even though I've given to Democrats. I've certainly been in this building as often as most Democrats. And by the way, they're doing a campaign to kind of renovate the building, and I just gave them a check for $250. Y'all are interested? They didn't tell me to say this. I'm saying it to you. It's a grand building with doing grand things, and that needs some renovation. But I do a lot of, I've always voted for the person. I always said to you, vote for the person, not the party. It was in my best interest to say that. But I too voted for the person, not the party. Always.
A little bit on the light side. I came early to see you last Thursday.
Oh. Oh, you lucked out. You didn't have to live through this.
Back in the day, you used to drive a Volvo.
No.
Back in the day?
No. Never a Volvo. I drove American.
American?
Now, I did make exception with used Jaguars.
My neighbor was supposed to come with me. He was so busy laughing, I told him not to tell anybody. So I brought him today, and he was a mechanic that used to work on your car.
Oh.
Bob Smith.
Oh, my God, Bob. Hi. On Capitol Hill. Oh, so glad to see you.
Two quick points. You autographed my book on my birthday in 2018. On my birthday. I looked at that book, and it's great. And I want to say we could use you downtown now.
Thank you.
Hey, Carol. I'm sorry I'm not going to see you this year at the Kennedy Center Honors. We don't know
Yes.
how that's going.
No, I've been boycotting them.
I feel you. I'm just curious to know what you have to say about this dialogue coming from the other side that DC is inept and has no business, and they don't know how to take care of themselves. So that's why we send the army to them, and that's why we are here to take over. And then on a lighter note, I'm just curious if you have any faith running against Faith Dane stories.
Well, that one I can't answer because I don't know what that means. No. No. Oh, no, no. Oh, no, yes, yes. Faith was a doll, such as I was really fond of her. But she was got to be like me, a perennial candidate, you know. But your first question was... Yeah, of course we can take care of ourselves, and we can take care of ourselves probably better than any city or state in the country. I think we've got the smartest people, the most diverse population. I mean, we are something special. Yes, we can take care of ourselves. But I mean, the only consolation as I have is that they're even going into other states now to take over. And I say that as a sad thing for them as well. But at least we're not the only ones that are being picked on.
Hi, Carl Cole here. First, Lawrence wanted to make a point of it about when did you become a Republican? Well, first of all, D.C. was always Republican. Believe me, I come from a long, long generational group of D.C. folks. We didn't change until the 60s, okay? With respect to Carol and the others, and on the city council, what most people didn't realize that in the reorganizational of DC politics and stuff in the 70s, there was actually a clause in the home rule charter which required them to have 2 seats that were from the opposing party. So those are little weird things that happen. But I want to thank Carol for the many years. I'm still Republican, by the way. When I ran the Republican Scholarship Program with Connie Mack and all the others, Carol was one of my greatest supporters. So now I get a chance to thank you publicly. As a result of her efforts, we sent a number of young people off to college who are doing exceedingly well today. So I want to thank you. And I also have to say my other partner in that was Chapman. Carl's dead. He served with me at that time when I served on the Central Committee with Ann Hewer and others. And I still remember an old buddy of mine named David. I don't think I have to tell you David's last name. You know, so thank you.
Well, thank you, Carl. That's very sweet. And I do think, you know, the party of old is, was a party you could be proud of. And certainly not true today. And I started to tell you this, I became an independent. I did not, even though I given to Democrats, certainly support more of the policies of Democrats, but I wanted to be able to be more influential by having, with Republicans as well as independents, by being an independent. And I've always been independent-minded anyway. It's no fun not to vote in the primaries, but other than that, I don't see much change. Yes, I see a hand right here.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
2 years ago, Culver King and I spoke here, and that was for the 50th anniversary of the passage of the Home Rule Act. He was working on the Senate side at the time. I was working on the House side. We're the only 2 people really left of the staff who worked at that time on the crafting of the Home Rule Act. And we can both attest, and we talked about it. It's online. If anybody would like to hear it, it's on the AOI's online, that discussion that we had. On the House side, they were very concerned that one-party government was not going to work well here. And that's why they reserved the 2 seats. Because then there would at least be Republicans on the council that could go speak to Republicans on the Hill when some of these riders were put in. And that's something we really have to consider. The council has come up with a way to create these phony independents. Sorry to say that, but they are. They run as independent Democrats, and that's what they are. They're Democrats. And that doesn't help us on the Hill. Carol mentioned that she was able to intervene in some of these riders, and so did David Catania when he was on the council. I know that because I was working on the Hill at the time. And so that's very important. The House wanted to have runoff elections or nonpartisan elections. The Senate wouldn't go along with that. So the compromise was the 2 seats reserved for political parties other than Democrats. And so now we don't have that. And it's really hurting us. We don't have anybody now in the council that can try and intervene on the Hill and talk with members on the Hill, Republicans. And maybe even get an interview with people in the administration. It's very important. We have a whole different structure, a political culture here to deal with. And a very important part of it has to be we have to have multi-party representation on the council. Very important. And so I've said my piece on that. Also, Eisenhower was mentioned. When Ike came in, his first message to Congress was, people are taxed here without their consent. They serve in the military, they pay taxes, they serve on juries, they should be represented in Congress and be able to vote for president. He got the 23rd Amendment through. He almost got the amendment through for voting and having representatives in the House of Representatives. It just failed by a couple of votes to get the 2/3 in the House. When I ran for office against Eleanor Holmes Wharton 3 times, that was part of my plan. Let's resurrect that Eisenhower, complete what Eisenhower started. I think it'd be very important to have representation in the House of Representatives. Thank you.
Now, there, okay, can we do, okay, I saw there was somebody over here that had a,
So, I've only voted Republican, and I'm curious, when I voted for you. And I'm curious how many other people in this room share that experience. There you go, there you go, okay. So I wanted to put that out there. But I finally did the free DC orientation, which is excellent. A little depressing, but also very uplifting. And I don't know if you're familiar with that organizing. They're pretty impressive. And twice you've made mention taking to the streets. So I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about that, because that's a pretty important theme in Free DC, but to do it in a very organized and strategic way. So
Yeah.
if you could comment a little bit more on that.
well, I mean, all of the things that are going on, I don't, I'm not a fan of, but I do think that, and I don't like sitting back, I like getting involved, but I do think that the more I just want to wait on the timing to our elected officials. Because I think there are people out there and they're protesting and I see them and I wave at them and I'm proud of them. But I think if we then en masse go out when they start doing bills that talk about doing away with our elected officials, I think then that's going to be very powerful, very powerful. And that's why I'm not saying people shouldn't be out there. And I'm proud of their being out there, and I wave at them and say thank you for being here. But I do think en masse we should go out when they start taking away or attempting to take away our elected officials. And I mean every one of us. I've also got other plans we should do too, which I won't mention, but I've got a whole set of plans when that happens.
I just want to thank you. Jan Duplain here was a member of this club in the 70s when I first came here from California and need to reactivate. Carol, I came here today. I just want to say this was one of the most extraordinary presentations. The fact that you selected to share with us your history as a young girl growing up and what you lived. I don't think we go to places where we can hear the personal stories of what shaped our politicians. And this was very important to know that we could identify. So I just want to congratulate you for doing that. And how wonderful it was. And just end by saying you know, you're a politician, you're a writer, you're on the board now with Theater Washington, covering all the theaters. What's next, my friend? Tell us. Thank you.
I think I tried that. I don't plan on running for office again. I do not plan on running for office again. But I mean, I sometimes wish I was down there. You know, I watched the debate yesterday at the council on having our stadium, you know, our commanders be able to play in D.C. I want to do a shout out, my own personal shout out to the council, because when they first got the plan, just like when Linda and I first got the plan for baseball, it was all of what we were doing and nothing what the richest guys in the world were doing. The thing we got presented with was all give, and these rich guys, because they had all bought the Canadian team, all the owners of all the other teams bought that team thinking they would just get even richer than they already were. And the plan that was presented to us had us paying for everything, and they were paying for nothing. And then Linda and I were part of the group that finally read all of the contract and found out that was the case, and we stopped it until we got a better deal. And we took our chair there took some real junk for that, but God bless her. She became the seventh vote against. And I wanted baseball. I had begged the commissioner on letters over the years, why not have the nation's capital have the national sports, and been begging. But then when I saw the contract, I nearly had a heart attack. And so we led the way, and we got a far better deal. Well, this council, bless them, when they got the deal, it was a similar deal where we did everything and the rich people did very little, the owners did very little. And now that council went to bat and brought a far better deal, which they voted on last night. And I say to them, I'm glad to have them come back, but only with all the caveats about getting some commercial, more homes, taking care of people that are going to be displaced in anywhere, and our trees that are going to be displaced. All of that was handled well, I think, by our council, and I thank them for it.
I'm Ann Lyko, and I voted for you when you last ran, and I've been very impressed with your service to the city and to the district. I would like to urge you to be explaining to the people of the District of Columbia, as well as the people of the United States, that unless we're a state, we do not have the rights of other Americans. And I just want to point out briefly to you, in Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government, and shall protect each of them against invasion. And on the application of the legislature or the executive, then the legislature can't be convened against domestic violence. We are not covered by any of that. We are not covered by large parts of the Constitution because we're not a state. And people don't understand that. They think that home rule gave us sort of semi-equality with everybody else, and just having your local government was enough, even when Congress didn't mess around with us. But it's not. And we need strong voices who understand how this country works to tell people that we need to be a state. There are no impediments against that except for Congress actually taking a vote. And I would bet you if that happened, when we were talking about Democrats versus Republicans versus whatever other parties there might be, they're going to flourish in the new state because it will actually mean something. I know we have a lot of people who would be excellent people running the District of Columbia or running the new state who don't run because they just get dissed. And because Congress can ignore them and treat them badly and doesn't take us seriously, ultimately. So we need to be pushing statehood. We need voices like yours to do it. And it would be good for Republicans. We would have a lot more Republicans because they'd have the smallest state right at the foot of the Capitol. They wouldn't have to spend a lot of money to go back and forth and only have one house. I mean, you could think of all kinds of things why you'd have a much better political system and a much more diverse one. But we, the people of the district, have got to educate the rest of the country.
Listen, I think the fact we do not have a voting member of Congress is unconscionable, it's abominable, it's a sin, it's every word you could come. And I'm so glad you brought this subject up. And that is that I think so many people across the country, and even before this group of Congress people, when we would go down the lobby for, a vote, to, have our non-voting delegate have a vote, they would say, well, but if we give it to you, this is what they would say to me, Congress people, who should be some smart, would say, why are we going to give you a vote? Because then what are we going to do about Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands? And I would say, excuse me, we're not a territory. We pay federal income taxes. The territories that you all mentioned are territories, and they don't pay federal income tax. Their men and women were not drafted to be in the serve in the military. So I said, well, so make us a territory, and then we wouldn't have to pay federal income tax, and we wouldn't have to go to the military. It wouldn't be mandatory for us. But that's what I'm saying. Congress didn't even know we weren't territory. We are the one and only totally abused people in the United States of America. We pay federal income tax. And none of those territories do. Good for them, bad for us. And that is unconscionable. Our whole government was taxation without representation. So no, I totally agree. We have got to get this abuse, and that, you know, in this democracy, of course, now it's even question what kind of democracy we are in. But all these generations and centuries have gone on without us being given the rights that we deserve and pay for. And there's so many things in the Constitution. It says everybody has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, I don't feel liberated by not having a vote. I certainly am not happy not having a vote. So there's all areas of our Constitution where it is so obvious that we are being abused. And I think, you know, like, talking about the Tennessee plan that, was being pushed before, trying to use the Tennessee plan, where I think it was in 1792 or something like that, where the Congress, the government said, Tennessee, you are a state. You are hereby a state. And they didn't have to go through that 7-year thing of going to all the states begging and pleading. They became a state. So why shouldn't the federal government just say to the District of Columbia, you are now hereby a state? They treat us as a state for every other reason. So anyway, I think I appreciate what you said, and I think it's an abomination. And everybody who lives in the district, who lives in the country, and certainly those who are elected to the federal government, should be ashamed of themselves for having abused us for so long. Oh, okay, but I have just one more little thing, and I like to leave any speech that I have done with this. Thank you, Cindy. And it's not even dinner time yet. There's oftentimes, when I go to temple, I wasn't able to do so as a child because there wasn't one, and my parents wouldn't have even sent me if there was one, but I have become a proud Jew and raised the same. Alvin, I find, he was a rabbi in San Francisco from 1948 to 1964. But in most of the books that we use in temple or synagogue, this statement is part of it. And it's very not anything to do with any religion. I think it speaks to life generally. But I wanted to give him credit for writing it. Life is a beginning, and death is a destination. And life is a journey from childhood to maturity and from youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness, and often back again. From fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backwards or ahead, we see that victory lies ahead, not in some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Thank you very much.
as is an AOI tradition, we have a certificate of thanks that we're giving to Carol. So we appreciate you being here. We appreciate you coming to, and all that you have done, past and current, for DC. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'd also like to say a special thank you to Marcia Rock, whose suggestion to bring Carol Schwartz here today and help facilitate that as well. So thank you, Marcia, for being here and for doing that. Carol, I'm going to say we're going to let you get to the back of the room to sell books. I'll let you do that. Thank you. Okay. So we'll have Carol stand in the back by her poster where her books are if you would like to get an autographed copy of her book. Thank you so much. We'll hopefully see you in October.